All right. So today we're going to go over the Injury Illness Prevention Program, Safe Practices Handbook, and we'll have some other training after this.
Click on the slide with the mouse, and then it'll let you advance. There you go. Now it should advance.
Okay. There we go. Thanks. So it's all about preventing injuries, illnesses, and working safely. A lot of this is driven by Cal OSHA. There is a regulation called the Injury Illness Prevention Program Regulation, and it's supposed to cover everything that other regulations don't cover. It's going to cover things like oddball stuff. Basically, what the regulation says is that we have to provide a safe workplace no matter what. If we don't, violation for that regulation. So here's what the elements of the regulation are: responsibilities, hazard identification, communication of hazards, accident reporting and investigation, and then there's record keeping. All right, responsibilities. All employees are responsible to work safely, participate in training, follow all the safety rules, use and maintain your safety equipment, report all incidents, and we also want to recognize the positive actions of others. Meaning if there's somebody that does something good, that's safe, you want to say something about it. So this way they'll be more inclined to keep on working safely. So please acknowledge your coworkers. For those who have direct reports, supervisors, managers, directors, you have additional responsibilities. Those include communicating those safety procedures, conducting inspections, reviewing incidents, making sure corrective actions are completed, training, providing resources like equipment, and enforcing all those rules and making employees accountable for safety. At the end of the year, there's a performance appraisal that everybody goes through. That's going to, there is a section in the performance appraisal part of the form that talks about safety. That's when the supervisor is supposed to provide feedback. My responsibilities are to evaluate workplace safety and, view any kind of injury trends and develop a lot of the written safety programs and procedures. I also help out the supervisors with inspections and incident reviews. I do design reviews for engineering and help coordinate the safety training and make sure that corrective actions are monitored. Safety committee also has some additional responsibilities. They are our communication conduits for safety. So they provide a forum and make sure that all the feedback from the employees get to the committee, and the committee members then give feedback back to the employees. They're supposed to be role models for safety, and they help out with the safety program. They basically help me out. They review incidents, recommend corrective actions, and overall assist in implementing the safety program. Safety is everyone's responsibility no matter what. All right, so this slide is actually two scans of fortune cookie messages that I got the other day from Panda Express. And the first one I got was this, the one on the bottom, to resist the temptation to take a shortcut of any kind. When I opened that up, I thought, wow, that's great for a safety meeting. So I kept that one. And then I opened up the second fortune cookie, and the other one says, now is a lucky time for you. Take a chance, which is not what we want. So don't take a risk. Your luck always runs out. There's a funny picture. All right. So part of being safe is making sure you have the right mindset and attitude. You always want to make safety the first priority, and you want to stand up to production pressure, make production second to safety. Don't take any shortcuts. If you feel any kind of frustration building about the way the job's going, you want to speak up and take action. Make sure you're respectful when giving and receiving feedback. You want to take breaks. You don't want to be fatigued while you're working. And before you even start work, you want to perform your hazard analysis and plan. Now, depending on what you do, if it's really high hazard, you may have to do a formal hazard analysis. But you want to plan even for routine tasks. This way you're thinking before you're working. Okay, this is one of the first elements of it's actually the second element of the IIPP, and that's identifying hazards. So we're required as employers to have a hazard identification system. We can do that in 3 ways. One is inspecting our work areas, which sometimes is not that effective because, you know, most of the time we're doing everything right. We may catch one or 2 things here, but that's one way to do it. The second way is to do a job hazard assessment, meaning you kind of go through the step-by-step what you're going to do, and that's a lot more thorough. It takes up a lot more time, but that's another way to identify hazards. The third way is probably the way we kind of rely on the most, and that's the employee reporting and communication of issues. So it says here employees are key. You guys know the work area the best. You guys, you know, go throughout the day, and then you may find things that, you know, these are not quite right. So we want those concerns communicated up. Just note that it has in the Safe Practices Handbook on page 5 that there's a no penalty policy for reporting safety concerns. And we want all employees to be empowered to bring up safety issues, stop work if there's something immediately hazardous going on. Reporting can also be anonymous if you have a concern that's not immediate, and but if it is immediate, we want you to report it out right away. Don't ignore it. If the hazard is identified, we want to correct it, but sometimes we can't correct it right away. So we do want to communicate out to people what the issues are, whether we want to red tag it, put cones around, you know, a hole, whatever it is. We want that to be communicated in some way so that people can at least avoid the hazard until it is corrected. We try to track all these hazards and corrective actions. Matthew's got this long list of projects that he's working on. Some of those are, you know, might take a year or 2 to fix, but we do fix them eventually. But we have to prioritize those by risk level until we get them done, and then we track them until they're closed out. All right, so the next element of the IIPP is safety communication. We talked a little bit about it already, about reporting concerns, but it's very important that there be a communication stream going out, because that's how we build a good safety program. If you got safety concerns, report it out however you can. One way is through your supervisor, through myself, or through the safety committee. If there's a building-related hazard, you speak to the landlord. For instance, if there's a hazard at Randall Bowl, you'll speak to John Parsons. We have anonymous ways, again, of reporting incidents. That could be done through a form. You can slip it in the mail. We'll look at other methods of anonymous reporting later on. We're meeting as a safety committee. We're looking at different ways about how things can be anonymously reported. All right, so giving feedback, again, is important. We talked about giving positive communication, positive recognition to employees. The reason why that's important is because then they'll continue to work safely if you recognize their safe behaviors. So here's some tips here. You want to be positive, sincere, respectful, and open, and describe what you observed. Just be objective about it, and you can describe what the effect was if it wasn't obvious of the behavior and action, and ask them to respond back to you. This way that you know that you'll know that that you acknowledge them. So that way, you know, we'll have a better safety culture if we do more of this positive communication. We have to do the constructive feedback too. If we see something that's not quite right, and again, you kind of use some of the same principles when giving constructive feedback. You want to be objective about the issue and not pick the person and blame the person for whatever the issue is. So again, you're respectful, you're open, you say what the safety issue is in an objective way, and then just say, this is the consequence in an objective way. You can get hurt, you can, I don't know, lose an eye or lose a finger. So you want to just state it like that, and then you want them to, then again, wait for an acknowledgement, at least of what you just told them. You may not agree on the issue, but at least you've communicated out, and I think everybody will at least be more careful after that. I would hope that you can persist to at least reach an agreement and not just walk away from it if it's really a safety issue you believe in. If you're the receiver of the feedback, you don't want to be defensive like the old guy here on the slide. You want to, be welcoming of feedback. Use it like just pretend like, not pretend, but consider it as a learning opportunity, and listen and focus on the content of what the message is, and not on some of the other stuff like the personality traits of the giver. Because not all people give feedback in great ways. So when you receive it, you don't want to be overly defensive and explain why you did this or that and the other. Just thank the person and move on. Make sure that everybody's then working safely after that. Some other ways we communicate: we have one-way communication through the website, training bulletin boards, newsletters, things like that. We have, again, safety committees, and we have a safety suggestion program that's on our website. Here's our website. This is what it currently looks like. If you've never used it, there's some little links that are at the top of the page in that yellow box. There's a link there for library. That's where our procedures are at. There's a link for reports. That's where all the incident reports are at. If you wanted to know who won the safety medal, you got the recognition tab. So then there's a bunch of other tabs here. Here's our safety committee. Ryan Freeborn is the chair. Rodney is the co-chair. And there's a whole bunch of site committees. Over in East County, you have Lance is the chair. All right, the next element of the IIPP is incident reporting review. So we're required by regulation to have some kind of written procedure to review accidents and incidents. When we do that, we then have to find the root cause, figure out corrective action, and make sure we correct them. So we have to have that whole loop. That's actually written in the regulations. Over here, you have some definitions of what an incident and an accident is. When there is an incident that occurs, you want to make sure that before you do any kind of review, they at least make sure medical attention is being taken care of first, and then we can do the incident review later. For vehicle accidents, some special procedures. We have a vehicle accident kit. It should be in every vehicle that you guys have, and it should have at the minimum the form with a pencil or pen, and that form describes what happened, what the other driver's registration, insurance, and driver's license information, and that all should be in there with a short description of what happened. If at all possible, contact the police. You definitely want to contact 911 if there's any kind of injury involved. When we get to the incident review process, the people involved are going to be the supervisor, myself, and the safety committee. For some bigger incidents, it may go up higher than that. So the ways we kind of do it: we collect information, take pictures, conduct interviews. After we've gotten all the information, we kind of analyze it, figure out, well, this is what the causes were. This is what will help prevent it happening in the future. And afterwards, we discuss lessons learned and we monitor corrective actions. For record keeping, that's kind of my job. I have an office full of paper. Okay, now we're going to go into the handbook. We'll talk about some basic PPE that's in the Safe Practices Handbook. All right, so everybody knows what their PPE requirements are. You're going to wear high visibility clothing when it's dark or when you're out on the street. Hard hat, safety glasses, safety shoes, whenever we're in construction sites, whenever we're at the treatment plants. Additional thing here is to be cautious around equipment operators. Make sure that the equipment operators and the people on foot have made eye contact so nobody gets run over. If you are on foot, you want to avoid working downhill of heavy equipment operations in case of a rollover. And now we'll briefly go over the office and general work safety section of this program. If you're an office worker, you should get your workstation evaluated for ergonomics. You have Jeannie from PRN come over, and she recommends different types of equipment and how things should be adjusted there. Basic stuff here, slip, strip, and fall hazards. It's all about housekeeping, watching where you're going, making sure that you're holding on to handrails, and cleaning things up. Again, it's all about housekeeping. Okay, this slide is maybe a little bit hard to see, but there's a slide on extension cords. So you want to make sure that if you have any kind of electrical equipment, whether it's extension cords or any kind of cords, that the equipment is in good condition. If the cords are frayed for whatever reason, we don't use that. We don't even try to fix it. We just throw it away and then we get something new. You don't want the cords to be damaged, so you want to protect them from being tripped on. You want to not use the cords to raise or lower objects. Don't use them as ropes, and don't run them through doorways. For those of you who might have power strips in your offices, the key thing here is not to overload the circuitry. Don't daisy chain, plug one power strip into another so you can get more outlets. For contract administrators, this is kind of a big eye chart, but key things to take away from here are that as a contract administrator, you're supposed to be responsible for communicating the hazards and the special safe working procedures of the district to the contractor and make sure that's documented. If they don't know what the hazards are, or they don't know what our special procedures are and they get hurt, we can get sued big time. So that's why that's important. We also want them to stay safe too, of course. Before work begins, we want to make sure that the contractor is a safe contractor. At a minimum, we want to make sure that they have written safety programs, which are listed right there, and they have safety training records for the particular high hazard work they may be involved with. And there's a list there, and the list is also in the handbook. Also, if we're working with contractors, you want to make sure that they have you review their work plans for certain areas, because they may bring in, lots of inappropriate equipment for the job. So you want to at least review what they're going to do, so they don't bring like a large piece of equipment for a very small area. You want to make sure that they do bring their own equipment and they're not borrowing equipment from us. If they do bring equipment that's assembled on site, you want to make sure that's put together reasonably well. Either have it inspected by themselves or by yourself, kind of look like that it's assembled correctly. Contractors are now supposed to go through the same things that everybody else does here at the district. Whenever we do high hazard work, they got to do the same sort of thing. They've got to do their precast plans and have at least a weekly tailgate for all high hazard work that they do. That means they have to write down their checklists and things like that. One last thing about energy control procedures. Contractors that work in our facilities have to follow our energy control procedures. So it's the contract administrator's responsibility to develop these ECPs out and have it reviewed by O&M before the contractor even touches the equipment. All right, and that's a summary of what we just talked about for now. Identifying and correcting and communicating workplace hazards is key. Providing a safe workplace. Your role is to be as safe as possible and follow the rules. Watch out and report and communicate your hazards to your supervisor or myself. And again, report injuries and illnesses immediately. All right. So that concludes the office part of the training. So I'm going to go to field operations, and so this is going to cover more in depth what the procedures are for field workers. Pre-task plans and tailgate meetings. You guys should know all about that by now. Before we do anything high hazard, and there's a list of what's high hazard in the handbook, like confined space entry, anything involving lockout, tagout, work with the crane. All those things we have to have a discussion beforehand where we're discussing what the hazards are and how we're going to protect ourselves from those hazards. All those things have to be documented. We also have a monthly pre-task checklist that solitary workers are supposed to do every once in a while. So it's kind of like doing a tailgate meeting, but by yourself. For those of you who do high hazard work that's non-routine, so that's going to be work that's maybe done once a year or maybe even less frequently than that. We have to do a high hazard work plan that's not just a tailgate meeting, but it has to be reviewed and approved by the supervisor and myself before work proceeds. And then we look at it to make sure that we have all the hazard protections in place before work gets started. So I sign off on it and the supervisor signs off on it. What's unique about the high hazard SOP also is that there's an emergency action plan also identified in the documentation. And here's a list of some examples of high hazard work that we talked about. You'll find this list in the Safe Practices Handbook. We talked a little bit about PPE in the earlier sections, hard hats, safety glasses. We didn't talk about gloves. So gloves are something that we expect you guys to wear whenever you're doing a lot of manual handling tasks, whether you're turning valves, lifting up materials, things like that, especially stuff that's sharp. Where you don't have to wear gloves is pretty much when, either when you're driving, using operating heavy equipment, or when you're writing something down on a piece of paper. We don't expect you to wear gloves. But we expect you to wear gloves, most other maintenance tasks. Here's some other things that are covered in the handbook. We have a lot of PPE requirements in here. Some of those include using metatarsal covers when we're jackhammering, use of fire boots out at the watershed and NOMEX. We also have requirements for at least at a minimum wear some arm shields when we're welding and cutting, if not the full, leather jacket to prevent from welding slag from hitting our bodies. Chemical resistant suits whenever working with corrosives or coveralls or aprons. We'll talk a little bit about PFDs in a little bit. Just note that all the requirements are in the handbook on PFDs, working in traffic as far as wearing high visibility clothing. There's also requirements to wear chaps when trimming trees or when we're working it through the high grass when there's snakes out in the open areas. We also have requirements about respiratory protection, which I'll cover in another course. But the key thing to learn here is that you can't just buy a respirator from Home Depot and just put it on and call it good. You have to be medically qualified before you wear a respirator, you have to be fit tested, and you have to be trained. And that has to happen every 12 months. So it's a big deal to wear a respirator. You can't just buy one and call it good. Hearing protection, that's worn when there's loud noises. There's a list of equipment that we recommend. We also cover that under a different course, so I'm not going to belabor that. Just note here, one of the odd things that's in the Safe Practices Handbook that's unique, I should say, is that when we're jackhammering, we want you guys to wear the insulated overboots whenever we're jackhammering over within 2 feet of electrical markings. We had an incident 2 years ago where we jackhammered through 480-volt electrical, so we want to prevent any kind of injury from potentially jackhammering through high voltage electricity. Here's some funny pictures. Notice the guy has got his feet in the water while he's working electrical, not smart. So we talk a lot about this, not using damaged equipment. We also want to make sure that things are not stored in front of electrical equipment like panels or MCC rooms. We got to keep those areas clear, at least 36 inches in front of the panels. In case there's a fire or in case there's something, you have an arc blast, you got to keep those areas clear. Here's one new requirement you guys have to know about. Whenever you're operating circuits that are 480 or less, this is the minimum PPE requirements as required by NFPA. You're supposed to wear cotton clothing, which most of you guys wear, but they have to be long sleeved. You also have to wear work gloves and earplugs along with your hard hat and safety glasses. So anything that's 120, 480, or anything in between, you have to wear at least that minimum amount of PPE to throw switches, and that's to protect against potential arc blast. GFCI use, whenever you're using electrically powered equipment. And this is more of requirements and procedures for our electrical techs and our instrument technicians. For those of you who have to work with electricity live, you have to have some special PPE, which we cover under another course. But basically, we want to follow what's on the arc flash labels or what's in the NFPA book, should there be no arc flash labels. We want to protect ourselves from any kind of electrical shock as well as arc blast. So wear insulating gloves, try to work one-handed whenever possible. But if you do have to work on equipment, we always want to make sure that if we can lock it out, tag it out, that's the preferred way of doing it, things, and verifying that lockout has occurred. All right, fire safety. It's all about good housekeeping here as well, and about making sure that the ignition source and the flammable liquids are separated from each other. So one tip that we have to always follow, whenever we got gas cans floating around the shop, we have to make sure that they're put in the flammable cabinet. We're not allowed by the Uniform Fire Code to keep more than 10 gallons of flammable liquid outside of the flammable cabinets. We've got to store those in the cabinets. Make sure all the containers are labeled and that metal trash cans are covered in the shop areas. Again, no smoking or any other ignition sources where fuels are dispensed. And here's an example of an unsafe thing here. Guy's working with gas and he's got a cigarette. Not smart. Bonding and grounding. So whenever we're dispensing flammable liquids, what happens? Does anybody know? Are you awake?
They're awake.
Yeah.
They're awake.
Yeah.
Awake
well,
and excited. Just not coming across well on video.
Okay.
Doing good, bro.
Probably a delayed response on the wire in the communication.
It's like I'm communicating to the moon there. So the thing to note here is that when you're dispensing like gasoline or any kind of flammable liquid, sometimes you can have a buildup of static. And if that buildup of static is not relieved in some way, it can cause a spark. And a spark with the flammable vapors, not a good combination. So we have to make sure that that static buildup is dissipated. The way that's done is through bonding and grounding. So let's say you're filling up your gas can full of gasoline. What's the best way to do that? Well, you want to make sure that the gas can is grounded. So that doesn't mean you put the gas can on the bed of your pickup truck. You put it on the ground. In this way, if there's any kind of static buildup to the safety can, to the gas can, it goes directly to the ground. You also want to make sure that the nozzle of what you're pouring out of is touching the gas can. If you're doing something like where you're dispensing something from a drum, you have to follow this setup that you see there on the screen, where you actually have wiring that goes from the can to the drum and wiring that goes from the drum to some sort of ground to make sure that there's no buildup either at the can or at the drum. Okay? What else do we know about fire safety is, well, we want to know how to use a fire extinguisher, and we want to know when it's safe to do so. If there's smoke, we shouldn't be inhaling smoke. We should get out of the building in those cases. The handbook covers a lot of other stuff that we're not going to cover today. So it has procedures on forklift operation, a little bit on HAZCOM, welding, tips, safety tips, fall protection, aerosol transmissible diseases, bloodborne pathogens, respiratory, industrial ergonomics, insect stuff, snake stuff, more fire stuff, and canal safety awareness. So there's a whole bunch of other rules that were covered under different training courses. But I will cover some things here that are not covered under some of the current courses regarding canal and reservoir safety. And that's use of PPE. We all know that we have to wear our PFDs when we're around drowning hazards, and there's some specific requirements. We're supposed to wear them when the drowning hazard here is 4 feet or may exceed 4 feet deep or more, or wherever it's indicated by signs or directed by your supervisor. You don't have to wear PPE when you're 6 feet more from the drowning hazard. You don't have to wear PPE if you're tied off properly, or if you're behind a fence or guardrail that's at least 42 inches high. Boating safety. Again, you have to wear your PFDs whenever you're operating or on a boat. You also have to do some other things beforehand, because it could be considered a high hazard task. You want to make sure that you have enough fuel and water for the trip. You want to make sure you have your communication devices on board in case you get stuck and you need to, communicate with somebody on shore. And you want to make sure that everybody's trained, weather reports taken, so you're not going out in inclement weather. You want to make sure you're not overexceeding the boat's maximum capacity. When you are out in the boat, always stay seated while the boat is traveling. Tractor mower operations. So for those of you who are mowing, you want to make sure that that people are protected from the hazards of flying rocks or debris from coming out from the tractor mower, or even from a push mower or weed eater. You want to make sure pedestrians are at least 300 feet away from the tractor mower operations and 50 feet away from push mowers and weed eaters. If you see people coming nearby, make sure you shut everything down. We have, again, more training courses that are required for us whenever we're operating certain types of heavy equipment. Just note that we want you to wear a helmet whenever you're operating the all-terrain vehicles. Tree trimming operations. So for those of you who trim trees, do not trim branches that are within 10 feet of high voltage power lines or within 1 foot of low voltage lines to protect against shock hazards. Don't climb trees. Use pole saws or man lifts to trim high branches. Use chaps whenever you're operating a chainsaw. And this is for the canal cleaning crews. Whenever we're maintaining the skip loader bucket, you know that the blade there on the bucket is very sharp. You got to wear some cut-resistant gloves when working with that. We're going up and down the canal. We have to use a ladder. We have a crane SOP that we have to follow, so we'll cover that in a different class. When getting on and off the canal cleaning sled, we don't want you to drown or float down the canal, so you have to wear at least a minimum of PFD as well as a harness so we can pull you out. All canal maintenance workers should have throw bags or similar rescue equipment, life rings or whatever, on their vehicles. Rebar. Whenever we're working with rebar, we got to make sure that those are capped. Whenever we're working with uncured concrete, just note that that stuff is very caustic. You have to wear gloves and boots when working with concrete. Herbicide application, follow the safety precautions on the product label. Those product labels should have all the PPE requirements. The watershed, I had some special hazards here. So if we have to drive on unpaved watershed roads, we let the watershed supervisors know where we're going, and watershed supervisors will also determine when it's safe to drive on those trails there. Because sometimes when we have periods of rain, we've gotten people stuck in the mud out there. We have people roll over. So we want to make sure everybody's safe and they're operating the correct equipment for those roads, should those roads not be in good condition. Speed limits are very important here. We had a fatality in 2006 because somebody was driving too fast for the unpaved roads. 15 miles an hour for unpaved roads. And just be aware that people have to be trained in wilderness first aid if you're going to be working out there normally, and be aware of the fire dangers out there. And lastly here we had an injury earlier this year regarding high wind speeds. So we want to make sure that wind speeds are monitored, and we want to limit non-essential work activities where the wind gusts exceed 40 miles per hour.
What's the wilderness first aid stuff?
Yeah, I had a question about that too.
Did you hear that, Sparrow?
Yeah. You said what is it? It's just
yeah. What is
like
the wilderness first aid?
It says to be trained.
That's a two-day course for. I think it's mostly for the watershed people. But that's a two-day course that includes, what to do if somebody gets hurt in a remote area. Like how to haul them back out of that remote area, because sometimes it's not like you can bring an ambulance to some of these areas. It's more for like rough terrain type of situations.
So is that something the canal group should be trained in?
Probably at least the grounds maintenance people. I'd have to check the matrix to see if anybody else needs to be trained.